This screencast will show you all sorts of books in the library that are about the American Revolution and that period in our history. First, I want to start off with some fiction titles because if you're interested in a particular period of history, sometimes a great thing to do is to read a book that's set during that period of history. And you get more information by the characters you're reading about. The authors have done a lot of research in historical fiction to bring the characters to life and to really describe the setting and the time period. So this first book here is by Avi, who is a prolific author. He has written so much. His books take up over one whole shelf in the library collection. This one's called Sophia's War. In 1776, after witnessing the execution of Nathan Hale in New York City, newly occupied by the British Army, young Sophia resolves to do all she can to help the American cause, including becoming a spy. The Secret of Sarah Revere and Cast Two Shadows are both written by Anne Rinaldi. All Anne Rinaldi writes is historical fiction. She is a master at it. So this one is about Paul Revere's daughter. So it's a really interesting way of learning about history and maybe learning about Paul Revere's family, but not about him per se, but about his daughter, which is not somebody that you really would study with your unit that you're learning in class, right? So that's kind of a neat take on it. Cast Two Shadows by Anne Rinaldi. This one, in South Carolina in 1780, Caroline sees the Revolutionary War take a terrible toll among her family and friends, and along with a startling revelation about her own background, comes to understand the true nature of war. The Revolutionary War, an interactive history adventure. This one is so much fun. These books are so great. They are a choose your own path book. So what a great brain break book to take. Just pick it up, read one of the paths. You get a story from beginning to end. You get to make choices all the way through the story and learn about the Revolutionary War in the process. So those are fun. We have them on all different topics in the library. This is one called Guns for General George Washington, a story of the American Revolution. It takes place in 1775 and 1776. Colonel Henry Knox and his younger brother Will, both of the Continental Army, become frustrated with the British blockade of Boston and decide to attempt to move 183 cannons from Fort Ticonderoga over 300 miles of mountainous wilderness to defend the besieged city. So definitely an adventure story here. Gary Paulsen, do you guys know Hatchet and that series? Well, this is another book by Gary Paulsen, a historical book called The Rifle. A priceless handcrafted rifle fired throughout the American Revolution is passed down through the years until it fires on a fateful Christmas Eve in 1994. So that one has some American Revolution ties to it. We also have some biographies. So if there's somebody you've been learning about that you'd like to know more about them, here's a few biographies. Ben Franklin, Alexander Hamilton. He's been a very popular guy in the library. Thomas Paine. And then here's America's Black Founders, Revolutionary Heroes and Early Leaders of some influential African Americans during that time as well. So some interesting biographies you may be interested in. All right, this one over here, we're moving into some informational books. So for you who love history and just want to keep reading and learning more through informational books, these are definitely for you. Washington at Valley Forge provides an account of the 6 months during which the soldiers in George Washington's command camped at Valley Forge in the harsh winter of 1777, 1778. This is a fun little book. Look how tiny this book is, right? It's a small little book with a large title, right? George Washington's Spy Master, how the Americans outspied the British and won the Revolutionary War. This one examines George Washington, how he used espionage during the American Revolutionary War, discussing the Culper Ring, the Sons of Liberty, code ciphers, and more. There's illustrations. It's a really fun little book. This one's a very popular one. It's checked out quite a bit from the library. It almost reads more like a fiction book because of the size of it, and it's written more in that kind of format. Liberty or Death, the surprising story of runaway slaves who sided with the British during the American Revolution. So this is a lesser known story of enslaved people siding with the British to fight against the new country, right? So that one's called Liberty or Death. This one, The Real Revolution, the global story of American independence. This one just explains about a lot of the changes going on through that time period and how the Boston Tea Party really changed a lot about the course of history during that time. Speaking of tea parties, America's tea parties, not one, but four, because there were tea parties in Boston, Charleston, New York, and Philadelphia, and this book dives into all of them. And then finally, some of the things you've learned about in your social studies class. Perhaps you heard the term Continental Congress and talked about that, the Declaration of Independence. So this is just a slim little book that's going to answer a lot of different questions and give you more information on a topic you might be very interested in. If you have any other questions about the American Revolution, please let me know. I'm happy to help you. I hope you found one of these great books interesting, and you can go ahead and place it on hold today.